Please let me out." This is what I heard coming out of the coffin. "My name is Daniel Cross, and I've been a funeral director for 23 years. I've seen every kind of tragedy pass through my doors, and I thought nothing could ever shake me again. I run Riverside Memorial Home, a small brick building near the edge of town. People say it feels peaceful inside. I know better. Peace isn't always real. Sometimes it's just quiet, because the truth has been buried deep. The case I'm about to talk about, I should have never touched it. Even after all these years, it's the only body that made me step back and question whether I actually wanted to keep doing this work. When the police brought her in, everything felt wrong. The time, the way they talked, the way they avoided eye contact. And the moment I unzipped the bag, I understood why. Something wasn't right with her face or her identity. Nothing matched the paperwork. Nothing matched the story I was told. And I've carried that secret for years, pretending it never happened. But the truth has a way of crawling back out, no matter how deep you bury it. Today, I'm finally telling everything. It was 2:17 a.m. when the police knocked on my back door. That hour alone told me something was off. We don't get deliveries that late unless someone is trying to avoid being seen. Two officers stood there, Hale and Mercer. I'd worked with them before, but that night they looked different. Sweaty, unfocused, like they'd run here instead of driven. Hale kept checking over his shoulder, and Mercer wouldn't even meet my eyes. They pushed the gurney inside too quickly, almost like they wanted it out of their hands. I remember Hale whispering, "Just prep her fast." Fast. That word never sits right in my line of work. When I touched the body bag, I felt something that made my stomach drop. It was warm. Body bags are never warm unless the person hasn't been dead long or unless someone is lying about the time of death. I asked for the paperwork. Mercer handed me a thin folder that looked like it had been filled out in a moving car. Half the lines were blank. The cause of death didn't match the injuries I could already see through the plastic. I said, "This report is incomplete." Hale stepped closer, lowered his voice and said, "We'll send the rest later. Just start your work." His tone wasn't asking, it was warning. Inside the bag, I noticed something else. The zipper line had smudges of dried mud. That means she'd been on the ground somewhere, not in a hospital, not in an ambulance, and definitely not in the condition they described. As they turned to leave, Mercer added something that made my skin crawl. "Don't open the bag until morning. Just store her." I nodded, but I didn't follow that order. I waited until their car lights disappeared down the road, until the night went quiet again. Then I rolled the gurney into the preparation room, because the truth was already screaming inside me. Something about this woman and the way she arrived was wrong. I broke the rules the moment the officers left. I unlocked the prep room, switched on the overhead lights, and pulled the zipper down. The smell hit me first metallic, sharp. It wasn't old. She hadn't been dead long. Not long at all. When I uncovered her face, I froze. The report said simple assault, but nothing about this woman was simple. Every part of her told a story of long, controlled suffering. The first thing I noticed was the ligature marks around her neck. They were deep, swollen grooves, tight enough to show someone had held her under control, but not enough to kill her immediately. Her wrists were worse, red, raw, bruised, as if she had been tied up for hours. The marks weren't random. Someone had held her tight, over and over. Gray dust clung to her cheeks. At first I thought it was dirt, but when I brushed it with my glove, it crumbled. Duct tape residue. Layers, torn off and stuck again. Someone had silenced her repeatedly. Her arms were covered in bruises in distinct patterns, fingerprints pressed hard into her skin. Someone had grabbed her, held her, slammed her down. Her knees had scrapes that weren't from falling. They were horizontal, like she had been dragged. Her ribs showed pressure marks, maybe from a knee holding her down. Her hair had clumps stuck together, and patches were missing where it had been pulled out. Her jaw was slightly out of place, probably from forceful handling. Then I saw something in her throat. At first I thought it was dried blood, But when I carefully lifted it with the forceps, it was solid. A tiny metal key, stained with blood, forced into her throat while she was alive. This wasn't random. I checked her toe tag, Mara Ellis. But something felt wrong. I read the paperwork again. The coroner's signature, Dr. Levin, was too neat, too fast. I knew it was forged. Someone had moved this body without permission. They were trying to erase her story. Then I heard a soft clink under the gurney. I knelt down. A second toe tag lay under the wheel. A different name, a different age, a different case. One body, two identities. I looked at her again. Duct tape, bruises, hair, key. A cold truth hit me. This wasn't the first name they tried to give her. It was just the first one the killer allowed to leave the building. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, the two tags shaking in my hand. The room suddenly felt colder, as if someone had opened a door I couldn't see, and that's when a terrifying thought crawled into my mind. What if the killer didn't just change her name? What if he changed her whole story? What if the police had brought me the body he wanted me to see, not the one they thought they had? I backed away slowly, my heart punching against my ribs. Nothing in the room moved, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else had been here before me. Someone calm and patient, who knew exactly how long I would take to notice the truth. Then I remembered the key from her throat, and a cold chill spread through me as I realized keys only open doors the owner chooses. The forged signature bothered me more than the injuries, so I wiped my gloves, grabbed the phone, and called the coroner's office. It rang longer than usual. Too long for a night when police supposedly just finished an autopsy. Dr. Levin finally answered, sounding half asleep and annoyed. "Riverside Memorial?" I said. "I received a transfer under your name. A woman, early 30s, severe injuries." There was a long pause on his end. Then he said something that made my hand freeze over the desk. "We didn't sign off any transfers tonight." I stared at the toe tag again, at the messy signature. "But the file says you released her at 12:46 a.m. We have no releases tonight," he repeated. "Everybody is still here. We're backed up." My voice dropped. "Are you sure? The police brought her straight from your office." He sighed sharply. "Sir, we haven't examined a woman with those injuries. We haven't examined anyone who fits that description." Every word he said hit me like a slow, cold wave. They never examined her. They never signed her out. They never authorized anything. I felt the room tighten around me. The lights suddenly seemed too bright, the silence too sharp. "Dr. Levin," I said quietly, "I have her here, on my table." He went silent again. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Who brought her?" I already knew the answer, but saying it out loud felt dangerous. Officers Hale and Mercer. The coroner swore under his breath. "They didn't come here tonight. Not once. Nobody saw them. We've been short-staffed. If they signed something, it wasn't from us." I pressed my fingers against my forehead, trying to stay calm. "So you're telling me the release forms are fake?" "I'm telling you," he said, voice low. "Whatever you have in your building was never meant to go through official channels." A chill ran through me. Never meant to go through official channels. That meant only one thing. The police didn't want an autopsy. They didn't want records. They didn't want questions. They bypassed the entire system, on purpose. I looked back at the woman on the table, at the bruises, the ligature marks, the key I pulled from her throat, the second toe tag. None of it matched. None of it made sense. And now the truth was crystal clear. She wasn't delivered to me for preparation. She was delivered to keep her away from the coroner and away from anyone who could expose what really happened to her. After I hung up with the coroner, I went back to the prep table. I needed answers, any answers, and sometimes the truth hides in the things a person leaves behind. The police had dropped a belongings bag beside the gurney, a bag they should have logged, a bag they should have sealed. They didn't. Inside, the first thing I pulled out was a broken phone. The screen was shattered, bent at the corner like someone stepped on it. When I pressed the power button, nothing happened, not even a flicker. But dried blood was smeared along the edges, almost like she'd tried to hold it while running. Next was a torn photograph. Only half of it was left. She was in it alive, smiling, standing beside a man whose face had been ripped clean off the picture. The tear wasn't gentle. It was angry, fast, desperate. Someone didn't want that man identified. At the bottom of the bag, I found a small key, covered in a dark, dried stain, more blood. Another key. This one wasn't the same as the one I pulled from her throat. It was longer, older, like a key for a storage unit or a padlock. Something important. Then a crumpled scrap of receipt paper slid out. On the back, carved in shaky handwriting, were 4 words. "He won't stop. Run." My stomach sank. Notes like that don't come from accidents, they come from terror. When I checked her hands again, something I'd missed earlier became obvious. Her nails weren't just broken. They were packed with skin, thick, pale, ripped skin. She fought someone. Hard. Someone who didn't expect her to fight back. I picked up the torn photograph again, turning it under the light. And then the shock hit me so hard I had to sit down. I knew that man. Not personally, but I recognized him. He had been at my funeral home 2 months ago, standing in the front row of another girl's service. A girl who died under unusual circumstances. A girl whose case also had rushed paperwork, missing forms, and nervous officers. And just like this victim, that girl's face was so damaged, it barely matched her ID. This wasn't random. This wasn't new. There was a pattern, one that had walked right into my funeral home before. And now, the same man was connected to both women. The photograph wasn't just evidence. It was a warning. I knew I had to check the funeral home cameras. If the paperwork and the coroner's office didn't make sense, maybe the footage would. Maybe it would tell me who really delivered her and why. I started with the rear lot camera. Hale kept walking too close to Mercer, whispering something I couldn't hear. Their hands jittered, almost like they were passing an object back and forth. As they wheeled the gurney forward, I noticed something odd. Hale reached up and blocked the camera with his body. Not for a second, but long enough to erase a clear view of their hands. I leaned closer, squinting at the monitor. Mercer glanced down the road several times, then waved at Hale. I rewinded the footage frame by frame. I wanted to see everything again. Every shadow, every step, every look they exchanged. Then I saw it. A dark SUV appeared a few blocks behind the police car. It followed them silently, carefully, keeping distance. My stomach dropped. I sped up the footage. It followed them all the way to the funeral home, slowing to a stop in the lot after Hale and Mercer had disappeared inside. The driver didn't get out, just sat there, engine running, headlights dim. The timing was perfect. Too perfect. Whoever was in that SUV knew exactly when the police would arrive and when they would leave. I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't a random drop-off. I rewind again, watching the whispered gestures, the glances down the road, the way Hale's hand lingered over the bag for an extra second. Every detail pointed to one fact. They weren't delivering a body. They were hiding one. The SUV stayed there for minutes, unmoving, patient. Then it drove off as silently as it arrived. But I caught the license plate, blurry but readable enough. I scribbled it down, hands trembling. Someone was waiting for her, someone outside the law, and they knew she was on my table. And somehow, I had no idea what they planned to do next. I sat there, staring at the frozen frame of the officers in the SUV, feeling the hairs on my neck rise. Everything about that night was wrong, and the surveillance didn't just show me the delivery, it showed me a threat waiting in the shadows, watching and ready to move. I shut off the monitor, but I could still see the dark SUV in my mind. Somebody was already inside my funeral home without me even knowing. It was late morning when the bell over the front door rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not today. Not ever after what happened last night. A man stepped in, calm, polite. Dressed in a plain jacket, dark jeans, clean shoes. Nothing about him screamed danger, until he smiled, and then I recognized him. The man from the photograph. The one standing beside the previous victim 2 months ago. The one whose face had been torn from the photo in the bag. He held his hands behind his back. His voice was smooth, quiet. "Mr. Cross?" he asked. "I'd like to see her. The woman who arrived last night." My throat went dry. I'm not sure." He cut me off, knowing my hesitation. "I'm not here to make trouble, I just want to understand." He moved around the lobby like he had been here before. I swallowed hard. I checked the monitors, the cameras. I tried to sound casual. He smiled again, polite, unnerving. "Yes, I saw. You were very thorough. Alone, wasn't it? Every word made my skin crawl. Every detail he mentioned was something he shouldn't have known. The time I unlocked the prep room, the way I rolled the gurney, the exact moment I picked up the torn photograph. He stepped closer. Not aggressively. Calmly, like a man who had rehearsed this encounter. And the coroner? You called him? Did he confirm everything? His voice had a weight to it. Curious, knowing. I shook my head, trying to maintain authority. You can't see her? This is private property? He raised a hand, soft, polite. I won't touch anything. I only want to see her. Just for a moment. I want to pay respects. It was impossible to tell if he was lying or if he would kill me without a second thought. Every calm gesture, every smile, every polite word carried a silent threat. I could feel it. He didn't need to raise a hand. I knew he could end everything here in seconds. Then he leaned slightly closer, voice almost a whisper. You checked the cameras last night. I saw you, alone. That makes me impressed, careful, but curious. Curiosity can be dangerous. I realized then what I was facing, a human predator. One who knew my schedule, my habits, my weaknesses. One who had been watching me long before he arrived. He smiled again, polite, almost pleasant. And now, he said, nodding toward the prep room, I'd like to see her. Just for a moment. My hands trembled as I realized. He had come to the funeral home not just to view the body, but to watch me, to test me, to see what I knew. I was no longer in control, and he had all the power. I stepped back from him, heart hammering, trying to act calm. Even though he left the lobby moments ago, the air still felt heavy, like he hadn't really gone. Every shadow in the corners of the funeral home seemed sharper, closer. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard it, a faint shuffle, distant at first, coming from the hallway toward the prep room. The building, normally quiet at this hour, felt alive with someone else's presence. I froze, realizing that the man from the photograph didn't need to be there to make me feel watched. It was 2:43 a.m. when I first heard it, a faint shuffle coming from the cold hallway. At first I thought it was the wind or the old pipes, but then the sound repeated. Something heavy, deliberate, moving across the floor. I froze. Tools on the prep tray were slightly askew. Not the way I left them. The gurneys had shifted. The cold room door was cracked open, just enough for me to see a shadow inside. I reached for the monitor, slowly, quietly. There it was. A dark figure moving with purpose, careful not to trigger any of the alarms. Silent, practically invisible. My heart pounded. I ducked behind the counter, barely daring to breathe. The figure approached the gurney holding her body. I could see gloved hands now, delicate and precise, searching her clothing like someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. I caught a glimpse of movement. A small object tucked inside her coat, something I had missed earlier. Something the police never noticed. The intruder's fingers closed around it. A key? A piece of paper? I couldn't tell, but I knew instantly it mattered. The figure didn't hesitate. They slipped the item into a pocket, checked the room with a slow, practiced glance, then moved toward the exit. I held my breath as the door clicked softly behind them, fading into the darkness outside. I waited minutes before moving. The cold room was silent, empty. The gurney was in the same position, but the object was gone. Everything else seemed untouched, but the knowledge hit me like ice. Someone had gone through her body, and I had seen nothing. I reviewed the footage immediately. The shadow appeared almost ghost-like, but the movements were too calculated, too controlled. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The intruder's gait, the tilt of the head, the gloves, they all matched the man in the photograph. It was him, the killer. The man I had seen 2 months ago, the one connected to the previous victim, the one calm and polite when he visited the funeral home. He had been inside while I was asleep, or so he assumed. I went back to the cold room, staring at the gurney. The body looked undisturbed now, but I knew the truth. It had been violated, rifled through by a predator who had studied every move I made. He didn't need force. He didn't need violence inside the funeral home. He only needed precision, patience, and my ignorance. And now, I realized something worse than death. He had taken something from her that he could use to control the story and me. I shut off the lights, heart hammering. I had been alone, watched, and powerless. And the killer had already walked out into the night, leaving me with the evidence of his presence and the fear that he would return. I sat in front of the surveillance monitor, dreading what I might see. I rewound the footage from last night, expecting to trace every move, every shadow, every sound. Then I noticed it. 3 hours of footage gone. Every frame between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. had been erased. Nothing remained. Not a flicker, not a blur, not even static. My stomach dropped. Whoever had done this didn't just break in, they controlled the story. I zoomed in on what little remained. A single frame, frozen in time. The man from the photograph stood there, calm, polite, smiling. But it wasn't a casual smile. It was knowing, deliberate, mocking. And in his hands, my blood ran cold. He was holding my own birth certificate. The paper was crisp, clean, and unmistakable. Every word, every stamp, every number was mine. The camera caught him looking directly into the lens, his eyes sharp, unflinching. He wasn't just stalking me. He wasn't only targeting the women connected to him. He had uncovered something personal, something hidden from everyone. I felt the room shrink around me. The lights seemed too bright, the silence too loud. All at once, the stakes were no longer about bodies, evidence, or paperwork. It was about me, my past, my secrets. I pressed pause, staring at that single frame again. The man's smile didn't change. It was calm, patient, yet full of menace. A predator holding proof, showing me I was now part of the game, one I didn't even know I was playing. The birth certificate wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a warning. He knew who I was. He knew everything about me, and the nightmare wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I received the call from the coroner late in the afternoon. I expected confirmation, closure, maybe even relief. What I got instead made my blood run cold. "Mr. Cross," the coroner said, voice clipped, professional. "The body you've been working with? It isn't who you think it is." I froze. Every memory from the last week slammed into me. Every detail, every bruise, every note, every photo, the pieces suddenly shifted. Different name, different age, different missing person case. Her dental records didn't match. Her fingerprints had been altered. Carefully, deliberately, I sank into the chair, trembling. Someone had switched identities. Someone had deliberately sent me the wrong body. And then the coroner dropped the final bomb. She was not the intended victim. She was trying to escape. My mind raced. The woman I had watched over, cataloged, prepared, she was not the one he wanted. Someone else had been taken instead. Everything I thought I knew about the body bag, the notes, the evidence, the warnings, it all suddenly carried a different weight. I had been working on a life that wasn't hers. The realization hit like ice water. The killer's plan was far more intricate, far more dangerous than I could have imagined. The truth was worse than I could have imagined.